All right, I'm not even quite ready yet, but I'm going to get this thing going. It's 5 after 10. That's not too late, I guess. If I ever start this stream on time, you will be able to take that as a secret message that I'm sending to you to say that like I'm being held captive or something like that. Anyway, so this stream is specifically with regards to the a forum that they had on Wednesday. It was the League of Women Voters. It was the Portage County Business Council, and there was one other one. The Student Government Association. So what they did was they put on a forum and they invited all of the candidates to come and speak at the forum. So they had Melissa Johnson and Mike Wiesa. No Craig Tesch, because he was outed in the primary and apparently, he filed paperwork to still run as a write-in candidate, but they didn't want him in the debate. So he was not there. So we did not get to hear his perspective on things. But the other two were. And so, and the Alder people. So a bunch of the people that are running for Alder, minus Gracia Day, who is running against Mark Christensen in District 1, and minus, who was the other one? Oh, Allison Burr, who is, I guess she didn't have to be there. She's not running against anybody. She doesn't have to make her case in any way. Allison Burr, who is the handpicked replacement of Melissa Johnson while she runs for mayor, since she can't do both. Probably just a placeholder, either a placeholder for Melissa Johnson or a proxy for Melissa Johnson. Because like I said before, Melissa Johnson's just too much of a political animal. She is not going to give up having some kind of say in city government. I don't know why she thought she had a chance at mayor. If the primary is any indication, she's going to get absolutely slaughtered. I don't know what the deal with it. Like we knew like a year ago that she planned on running for mayor. I mean, she didn't really keep it a secret or anything, but I guess I'm not sure why she did that. Just because, especially if that means giving up a city council seat. Like, I don't know what she saw as a weakness in Mike Wiesa that she thought she could exploit and beat him in a campaign. I don't know. I don't know if Business 51 was supposed to be like a catalyst, like, hey, look what I did. Look at this great thing I did. But of course, we all know that just like completely blew up into a major controversy. So, like, nobody can hang their head on that. Except maybe Kevin Vladoff, because he's the one that basically single-handedly stopped the whole project. So, he obviously was the victor in that one. But yeah, so they brought the mayoral candidates in first, and it was just question and answers. So there's really not much to say about Mike Wiesa, right? Like, there's no I honestly, the notes that I took, like, I didn't even really take that many notes about anything he had to say, because he's mayor, and he's been mayor for like almost a decade at this point, and he's got this history. He has an entire history of doing things in city government and operating from a certain perspective, from a certain philosophy, and like, there's not much to say about that. Like, he can't. Yeah, like, one of the things that I always find really goofy about political debates that involve incumbents is, if everything's gotten worse, the incumbent has to somehow come up and make the case that, like, we just didn't have enough time to do everything we wanted, or people didn't cooperate with us like we thought they should have, or like whatever. Like, it's always a really goofy thing. You see this in presidential debates all the time. You'll see it in this presidential debate when Joe Biden has to get up there and talk about how, like, how his presidency has really been like this wonderful thing, even though everybody is suffering greatly with inflation and bank collapses and train wreckage and like whatever else. He has to somehow make the case that you should give him another 4 years. Um, Wiesa doesn't have to do that because I've been in Stevens Point forever, and I can say without a doubt, Stevens Point really is better now. It's more expensive now, um, but it's better now than it was 8 years ago, from my perspective, anyway. And I like Wiesa doesn't really have to say anything. He can basically just sit back, not say a word, and just that's it. He still wins the debate because he's got all the history there. So really the one that I was paying attention to was Melissa Johnson. She's the burden is on her to show up and make the case that Mike Wiesa's administration is really dog shit and she's going to come in and clean up the dog shit and give us a nice yard again. That's what I was expecting when I went to this thing. That's not what we got at all. Um, she did not make her case. She absolutely did not. And we'll get into more of that in a bit. And really, she just struck me as a politician. She just struck me as she always strikes me, as somebody who is um, trying to tiptoe around issues, not really ever give direct answers to anything, try to be as flattering to everybody around her as possible. I just that like there was nothing there. There was really nothing there. It was just an empty pink suit jacket. There were no answers. Look, if Wiesa had like if everything in Stevens Point had gone to shit over the last 8 years, that doesn't necessarily mean that Wiesa was responsible for it. But what it means is that you can give an opportunity. It means that him being mayor couldn't do anything to prevent it. And maybe bringing in a different mayor doesn't solve the problem. In politics, it usually doesn't. But at least you're willing to give the person a chance. And in the same way, I think Stevens Point is better. That's not to say Wiesa gets all the credit for that, but it certainly says that him being mayor uh, didn't impact uh, how it's gotten better in any way. So, like, there's no harm in just leaving him there, right? Like, no matter what your personal feelings about him as a person are, and my God, you people have opinions on that, don't you? But like, it doesn't matter because him being there has certainly not made everything worse off. Like I said, it's gotten more expensive, but that's not really on him. If you watch any of the city council meetings or the committee meetings, you know that he pretty much is a hands-off person. He says that in the debate. So let's see what are their questions here? I took down all of these notes and I thought I wrote down the questions. Oh yeah, okay. So one of the questions was why do you think you would make a better mayor? And again, Mayor Wiesa doesn't have to answer that at all. He can just be like, he can just sit back and be like, hey, just look at my record. That's it. That's all he's got to say. Melissa Johnson, on the other hand, she has to make the point. So they talk a little bit about their mayoral philosophy. Uh, Mike Wiesa, his philosophy is that the mayor is the chief of the town, and it's his job to carry out the wishes of the city council and direct city staff in such a way that council dictates. Melissa Johnson has a much more hands-on approach. She thinks that the job of the mayor is to go in there and direct city council to enact what she wants them to enact. Not necessarily like city council didn't really come up in anything she had to say as mayor. It was always just, well, like, I want to do things. I have a vision. I want to do this. I want to do that. There was no mention of the council at all. And she does give a lot of flowery language about, I want to surround myself with brilliant people and people who can tell me like what policies are good or bad. But again, like nothing about the people that actually get elected. It's just all about, she kind of wants the position just to do things. Whereas Wiesa has a completely opposite approach. Well, I would say it's completely opposite, but he wants council to do things, uh, come up with the policy, and then it's his job to take that and direct city staff in such a way to carry out the policy. So that, I guess, is where their differences lie. They are pretty different philosophies. Of course, it was all like audience questions. Well, it starts off with questions from like the League of Women Voters and like the people that run the show. They get first crack at giving their questions, and then Wiesa has to come in, or uh, like the audience gets to bring their questions up later, and Wiesa and Johnson have to answer those questions. So I submitted a question. Obviously, mine didn't get asked, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. But a lot of the questions that were asked were pretty stupid, if I'm being totally honest. Like, they're really not helpful in any way. And like, if the point of the forum is to help inform you who would make a better mayor, some of these questions don't help at all. There was one question, uh, what about the Justice Center? Like, what are your thoughts on keeping the Justice Center in town? Nobody who lives in Stevens Point wants the Justice Center to be taken out of the downtown area. Okay. Nobody. It's a dumb question. Like, I don't know what they were expecting from this. Melissa Johnson gives this whole answer about, well, it's a big constituency for downtown businesses, and we have all the lawyers down there, and blah, 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 blah. And all the mayor did was say, yeah, I agree with that. Because everybody agrees with that. Everybody knows this. So, it was a waste. It was wasted time for like what there could have been better questions there. So whoever's vetting these League of Women Voters, please try it. This is my first League of Women Voters, the first time watching one of these forums. Please do a better job of vetting your question, because you guys are vetting the questions. Obviously, that's why mine didn't get read. But my question, even though it was kind of a stupid question, was more about putting them both on the hot seat and having to think outside the box about something completely crazy. Okay. That's why I submitted the question that I did. Getting a question like this is just a waste of everybody's time. Everybody knows how everybody who lives in town, and especially if you have a downtown business, everybody knows how you feel about the Justice Center staying downtown. Okay. So Legal Women Voters, please try to do better in the future on that. What else we got here? So one of the other things that she says she wants to do is, so by the way, this is just like a Melissa Johnson said this podcast, right? Because she's the only one that we have to listen to in this case, because she has to make the case for herself. Just got to keep reiterating that. That's the point. She wants to build a better connection between the students and the neighborhoods that they live in, and give them more of a stake, I guess, in the community. Uh, you find that she has a lot of lofty goals like that. What she does is and I promise you, I am not just on here to beg on Melissa Johnson. I'm really not. But as a point of critique, for somebody who's running for mayor, she has a lot of lofty views like that, with zero detailed explanation for how she wants to go about and make these things happen. Trying to bring greater connection between college students and the neighborhoods that they live in. like I don't know really what that means or how she would intend to do that, and so it would have been nice to get some more explanation for that because I feel like that's something that's just been going on for years and years and years, ever since the university's been here. It's something. Cindy Nebel deals with this all the time, right? When she was on city council, she always talked about this, like how she's always trying to, uh, you know, connect with the college kids in some way. And, but yeah, the problem is you're dealing on the one hand with people who are just renting properties and they're just there to go to school. From a college kid's perspective, they don't give a shit about the community or Melissa Johnson's lofty goals of bringing them together. Uh, they want to get drunk. They want to play video games. They want to bang. They want to do a lot of things. Okay. None of them have anything to do with having a stake in the community. Now, I don't know if she's just too far removed at age 67 to remember what it was like to be that age. I'm almost too far removed in my 40s, but like I still remember what it was like being a 20-year-old kid. They didn't give a shit about you or your community or anything. Like that's just the reality of the situation. So again, I just would have liked to have get more of an explanation for like because it's a lofty goal. It's a good goal, okay? Like it sounds good. It's nice sounding, but there's no substance to it. And that's really my biggest critique of everything Melissa Johnson related. There is no substance to anything she has to say. It's all just lofty idealism and no implementation, which I thought was disappointing. This is just one example. We'll get into more. Homelessness and the housing situation that came up. So again, she doesn't give any answer here. She talks about how if you're a felon, you probably won't get housing. She starts off talking about that and then abruptly abandons her train of thought and gets into talking about how we need to balance out the cost of living in Stevens Point and the amount of money that people make in Stevens Point. It's later pointed out that half of the population of Stevens Point teeters on the verge of poverty. Did you know this? I didn't know this. That is wild to me. But I mean, that's for later on. But she kind of starts getting into that here with this question about homelessness and housing insecurity. Uh, Again, doesn't answer the question. Again, just talks about being a felon, how you're not going to get a house, probably. And there's a discrepancy between what people make and how much housing is. And then finishes off with a quote that I'm sure she planned out ahead of time. This is just like a one liner she threw in there. We cannot have a thriving economy if our downtown sidewalk is a bedroom. Okay. I don't know that that's necessarily true. She seems to think it's true. She seems to think that if you are homeless, it is because the economy has failed you in some way. I don't buy that explanation. I think there's a lot of other reasons people are homeless than just they can't get a job or they can't get housing. I think that's mostly bullshit because the poorest people in Stevens Point still have and like I worked with these people, right? I worked for 20 years in the special needs community. These are people that have nothing, that have literally nothing, who can barely pay their bills. And there's still housing for them. They're not living on the streets. We still manage to find housing for them. So to just say that to bring it back to the economy and say that somehow it's the economy of Stevens Point that's making people homeless is not necessarily true. That might be true in a couple of cases, but for the most part, I don't believe that's true. And so, yeah, again, it's another question that she answers with rambling mostly, and no solid, concrete, this is what we need to do. You don't get that from Melissa John. You don't get, this is what we should do at all. The mayor, on the other hand, and I I had to write this down because it was kind of striking when you see these two sitting next to each other. The mayor gets on there and he's like, "These are the things we are trying to do. Uh, like we need. We're working on affordable housing. We're working on housing that already exists and trying to make it affordable to live in Stevens Point." Um, what else did he say? Oh, they've talked to developers, like tiny house developers, looking into ways that they can build apparently a tiny house. Like, he didn't get into details about that, but apparently tiny house developments for homeless people or low income people, which I think is an interesting idea. I've always been interested in the tiny house ideal and what that could bring to the table. In a lot of communities, and I don't think Stevens Point is one of them, but in a lot of communities, they've outlawed them. And we're not one of those communities. So we can bring them in, whatever. It sounded interesting to me. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what the mayor is doing behind the scenes to talk to people and bring them in. But the point is, now I'm rambling like Melissa Johnson does. The point is, the mayor is very specific about answering the questions. Melissa Johnson is not. And we see this with the housing. So again, who's better mayor material? I mean, I have my answer. Okay. All of those were covered by the League of Women Voters, Student Government Association, Portage County Business Council. And then we get our first audience question. Not my question, sadly, but a good question, a standard question in these situations. What sets you apart from the other candidate? Okay, that now we should start getting good answers from Melissa Johnson at this point, right? Again, Mayor Weasel doesn't have to say anything. You can just say, "Look at my record." That's what makes me a better candidate, because I've already done all these things. She hasn't. She's trying to get you to vote for her, but I've already done them. So, like, what is her answer? Her answer is she likes to build people up and she tries to surround herself with brilliant people who will help her make the right decisions. Okay. Good for you, I guess, but that doesn't really answer anything. It says nothing about why you're a better candidate. Like, is Mike Wiesa not that person? Does he not try to work with people and try to surround himself with people who know what they're doing? I think he does. I think he tries to. Well, he even says this in the forum that he goes to city staff and tries to work with them. And anytime somebody has a problem, he tries to go to city staff and work out some kind of solution that benefits everybody. I mean, from what I see, he already does this. So just like, that doesn't set you apart at all. So I don't know why she's giving that as an answer completely. And look, by the way, like I said before, I'm not just here to beg on Melissa Johnson. I have nothing against her as a person. But the thing is, I am very, very difficult to please when it comes to politics, when it comes to government. And I am going to dress just about anybody down who is trying to come into a position of authority like this. I am not impressed with flowery language at all, at all. And from what I can see, this is what she really excels at. Like I've known this before, having followed local politics for the last 3 years. Like, you see this come out with her over and over again. But man, Melissa, you gotta do better in these forums like this. You have to give me a reason to vote for you. The flowery language, like it I'm immune to it. Okay. I'm like lead to radioactive material. You can use all the flowery language you want, and it's just going to bounce off of me. It's not going to get through and make me want to vote for you. That's not enough for me. The reason for that is because I pay a shitload in taxes to this city. So I don't care what you have to say as far as your lofty ideals and stuff like that. That doesn't make me think, well, gee, this is really a worthwhile expense of my massive amounts of money that I spend. So, or not that I spend, that's just taken from me. So, yeah, Melissa, just as my one major criticism is you got to do better here. You got to give some straight answers. I'm not seeing any of that. And then, of course, I think this was the last question. So this was the last question in the mayor debate forum, whatever. I guess there wasn't much debating going on. Business 51, of course. Business 51. Melissa, of course, like we all saw how that went down. Like there's nothing to say about that. And the mayor, to his credit, he came out after the vote and he said, all right, everybody, it's over. It's now time to start working together, and we are not moving ahead with this, and it's time to stop yelling at each other and bickering, which like that's awesome that he did that. Like even I was impressed by that. And I cannot be impressed by politicians ever. But I love how he just said, all right, well, that's it. We took a vote and the referendum people won, and now we're going to start working together and we're going to put this behind us. That was awesome of him. Melissa Johnson, I feel like would have just doubled down in some way, and I get that impression from her answering the question on Business 51 in this case. So she makes it clear that she stands by her decision, and I don't know how you stand behind a decision like that, knowing how it all planned out. She was wrong. This was a bad decision that she made. The decision to not work with the Southside Business Association, to not listen to anybody who came forward with their concerns. It blew up in everybody's face, not just the city council, but in everybody's face. Now we have to go and vote on like every road project over $1 million, which look, it's not a big deal. Okay. It's really not. But this all could have been avoided. All of this. But she made a bad decision here. And she stands by making a bad decision. Okay. That's good to know. It's good to know that you're digging in. You're not admitting that the way you handled this was wrong, to the point that it blew up in everybody's face. And you failed to listen to people in this instance. You're standing by that decision. How do you think people are supposed to take that if you're mayor? You think that they're going to have any more confidence in your ability to listen to people as mayor? I don't think so. So, yeah. She goes into, oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't the last question. The last question was, how are you going to make Stevens Point more diverse and equitable? Well, again, I think it's kind of a dumb question because I don't think that's something government can do. I think that's just a matter of just the free market at work and how individuals interact with each other. That's my personal opinion. I don't know what government can do about this, because again, government is just what is it really? It's force, really. Like I don't know how you force people into being more equitable and diverse and things like that. But anyway, she talks about how she okay, again, she's kind of shooting herself in the foot. Again, it all sounds good if you are not like really keyed into what a politician is really saying. But she immediately makes the case that, well, she formed the diversity and inclusion committee at the county level. And so she's very well versed in these things. Uh, she formed a committee that's basically a joke. Let's be honest. Like, it hasn't done anything for, I mean, the first couple years of its existence, it barely even met. Like, they couldn't even get together to meet on anything. And then when they did meet, uh, it was a joke. It really was. There's no other way to describe it. It was just a laughing stock. And I know that it persists today and they have new people in there. I know when the new county exec came in, he appointed new people. So I don't know how it is currently. Maybe it's a lot better now. Maybe they're actually getting things done, but she's trying to stand on her achievement with something that's laughable. That's done absolutely nothing in the 3 or 4 years that it's been around. Like, it hasn't accomplished anything. And she's trying to bring this up as proof somehow that that's how she's going to make Stephen's Point more equitable and diverse. And then of course she gets into her support of road equity. So she tries to talk about how, well, we're trying to bring equity in transportation too. And again, falling back on something that blew up in everybody's face, and she is digging her heels in on and saying, I stand by my decision. Not impressive. There's just nothing here that's impressive. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is nothing personal against Melissa Johnson herself. But if you're going to come into a forum and try to make your case for why you're better than the other guy here, I mean, Wiesa, the whole time he came off as confident and knowledgeable about everything. That's just how he portrayed himself. And basically just sat back and was like, yeah, just go look at my record. She had to make the case. She did not. She talked a lot. She used a lot of flowery language, but none of it amounts to anything. None of it amounted to anything. I got no answers. So, I mean, if I'm basing my vote purely on this forum for mayor, I'm absolutely voting for Wiesa. There's no question about it. Yeah. So anyway, that was it. That was the whole my assessment of the mayor forum. Yeah, not much to say. I should say not much more to say. Okay, moving on to the alders. This should be, yeah, this is a little shorter just because I really didn't have anything to say about any of these people, just a bird's eye assessment of it. I mean, like, none of these people are unlikable. A lot of them just kind of gave the same answers about everything. I did nitpick on a few people here that I'll talk about in a second. But again, like, I'm not, so David Plaisance, who was already the alder for District 6, he replaced Ron Carlson. I don't know anything about this guy because I stopped paying attention before Ron Carlson even left. I had, kind of stopped paying attention to everything with the city government. So I don't know anything about this guy. So I was really watching him. Sam Lang and Keith Kudrowski, who are both running for Polly Dalton's old seat. There is Tim Johnston, who's running against Mary Kneebone. Mary Kneebone's been on council for years. Wasn't really paying that much attention to her. Yeah, like, obviously when they talked, I was paying attention. I just mean in the sense that I'm not really interested in hearing from her because like I already know all of her positions on everything just from following her on city council. Mark Christensen, kind of the same thing. If you're following him on city council, you kind of already know how he's going to answer these questions. Wasn't really paying too much attention to him. And then there was Jason Barrett, who was running against David Plassance. So basically, the newcomers are the people I wanted to hear from. Obviously, you already know where the incumbents are going to stand. It's too bad Gracia Day wasn't there. I would have liked to hear from her. It's too bad Allison Burr wasn't there. I would have liked to hear from her, but they were not. So one of the first questions that came up was the housing task force had released a document. I talked about this in my last stream, giving their recommendations for solving the problem of housing insecurity, homelessness, whatever. And one of the thing that got the most controversy was redefining the family to from two unrelated people to four unrelated people. Okay. Nobody likes that, apparently. Uh, People are showing up to the meetings and really complaining about that. So, of course, this was the question. Personally, I don't, I mean, it's just kind of a weird thing to quibble about. I don't really care. Personally, Sam Lang makes the point that the language is sloppy and he doesn't think that the current definition of telling people where family begins and where it ends, like, I agree with that point. I agree with that sentiment. I disagree that the city even really needs to define it at all. I get that they are they're very keyed into all of these little rules and definitions and things like that. Personally, I think it's silliness. I think it's just an exercise in silliness, but whatever. I'm not there. Uh, so David Plassance makes the case that look, housing is already an issue. I don't see why we would, if you have 3 spaces available in a house, why wouldn't you let somebody live there? Which I thought was a great point. Mary Kneebone makes the point about, if you're a young couple and you're trying to make it, maybe you want to bring in somebody to rent a room in your house. Again, a good point. They all do seem to agree that 4 people is too many. 3 people should be fine. 4 is too many. They all seem to agree on that point. But they all make good points. But all the good points that they make, you can make for the 4th person too. I just want to point that out. Like Mary Kneebone's point, David Plassance's point, Sam Lang's point. If you want to define a family by 4 unrelated people, then yeah, like all your points are still, they still stand. So it was just kind of a matter of, this is my opinion. Yeah. More than 3 is probably too many, but nobody really made an argument for why that was. So just pointing that out. The next question about department budgets falling due to inflation. So the moderator made the point that city workers got a 3% raise, but inflation was 6%. I think it's higher than that. I think maybe the government is saying that it's 6%, but there's other metrics that actual economists use that show it is much higher than 6%. And I think we all intuitively know that it's much higher than 6% every time we go to the grocery store or pay a bill. So they're obviously just using the government metrics of 6%. So the point was, the city gave its workers a 3% raise, but essentially they got a pay cut of 3% because inflation is 6%. Okay. What should the city do about that? Well, I think Keith was the only one who said, like, the city can't do anything about inflation, and they can't. There's all the city can do is raise taxes or cut spending. Those are the only available options. It's got to be one of those things. So everybody made a good point that oh, let's see. No, I think Keith, I think, was the only one who made the point that inflation is out of the city's control. And not only that, but it's not just the workers, the city workers that people should be concerned about. Everybody else is suffering from the same inflation that the city workers are suffering from, but they're all expected to pay for the city workers too. So, I mean, what do you do about that? David Plaisance made the point that most people didn't even get a 3% raise. So basically, he's saying, oh, you guys got a 3% raise. Congratulations, because most of us didn't. Which is a good point, really. Mary Kneebone, she knows what it's like to live on fixed income and to have her property taxes go up. This is a common theme with Mary Kneebone. Every time she votes to raise property taxes, she makes it a point to say, I'm a senior on a fixed income and, I'm worried about getting taxed out of my home. That doesn't stop her from increasing property taxes for some odd reason. I've made the point before that she is very lucky to be on the fixed income that she is, that allows her to stay in her home and not get taxed out of it, even though she keeps raising property taxes. Because I don't know if I want to say most, but a lot of people are not that lucky. They're not living on fixed incomes that allow them to have to deal not only with the inflation, but with the constant raising of property taxes. And again, when I was running for city council in 2020 or 2022, I think, maybe it was 2020. No, I think it was all the way back in 2020 where, I said, or no, this was after I was running for city council when the stimulus checks, the Trump checks first started coming out. And I said back then, back in the fall of 2020, we're going to get some massive inflation that's going to hit us in a couple of years. You can go back and watch live streams where I talk about this, and I actually criticize city council for putting together this budget without accounting for the inflation that was going to hit and raising taxes on people's property without accounting for the inflation that anybody who pays attention or anybody who knows even basic economics saw coming a mile away. Apparently this caught them all off guard. So, Mary Kneebone, she's on a fixed income too. She wants you to know that. So the answer from Mary Kneebone and Sam Lang was, we need to go to the state and federal government and get money. We need to get money from them. Okay, guys, they have their budgets too. Okay. And they don't want to give up any of that money either. So they are going to fight you for this. They don't have endless amounts of, let's be honest, the Federal Reserve certainly feels like it can print money on behalf of government policies endlessly, but that's how we get inflation, guys. We get it because government keeps printing money. I know a lot of these people are probably inclined to tell you that somehow greedy corporations are just gouging us all, and that's why prices on everything are so. No. Again, this is basic economics, guys. The Federal Reserve printing money is what causes inflation. That's it. And when you are going to go begging the federal government to print more money for you to get some of that money back, all you're going to do is raise inflation even more, and you're going to be just as bad off as you were at the start. Mary Kneebone and Sam Lang it never occurred to them maybe, but they don't seem to understand that point. And so the answer just seems to be, well, we need, Mary Kneebone says, we need a mayor who's going to lobby the state government vigorously to give us some of our money back. Why? Now, maybe I'm just a radical here, but why are you even sending them money to begin with? Because state law requires us to send so much money, blah, 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 blah. Okay, who cares? All right, just don't send them money. Just say, hey, we need this for our own purposes, and don't send it to them. What are they going to do? They're going to come arrest you. They're going to send soldiers and tanks to Stevens Point to force you to give up. Like, what are they really going to do, guys? I, I don't know. But what I would like to propose is maybe just stop sending them money. What happens? That's a question for Ryan Kornowski. That's one that I got to email him on. Like, what happens if the city of Stevens Point just stops sending the state of Wisconsin any money? Okay. So, not impressed with Sam and Mary's answers there, but they're pretty typical answers from people uh, of a more progressive bent, right? More of a left-leaning bent. It's always, well, go to the next phase of government to get money because they have endless supplies of money, apparently. So that's always the answer. The next question had to do with how do we heal the divisiveness in our community? Uh, I I don't know that there's an answer for that. I mean, everybody gave an answer. And everybody's answer was along the lines of, well, we need to start understanding people and listening to them more. Okay, that all sounds fine and well. In practice, that doesn't work though, does it? So Mary Kneebone, I'm going to single her out here because she already sits on the council and she, more than anybody else, has already had a chance to prove this and has not. So she says, it's not us versus them. It's not win or lose. It's about we're neighbors and we're all in this together and we need to work together to figure it out. Anytime anybody sitting on the current city council says something like that, my eyes just glaze over because you know what? You guys had that opportunity with the whole Business 51 thing. You all failed magnificently on that one point alone. So you do not get to sit there and lecture people about community and listening to your neighbors and trying to understand people. You don't get to do that. You failed already. Okay. You had that test and you all failed. So I would just like to point that out. I didn't go after anybody else because well, I don't know that Mark Christensen necessarily said, and he was kind of a newbie coming on anyway during the referendum thing. But no, like, I'm not going after anybody else for saying that. Only Mary Kneebone or Melissa Johnson, because they both sit on council and they both failed to do that. So you guys get no points with me for, again, it's just words. It's just words. You're not demonstrating that in reality. You're just saying things. All right. How do we strike the right balance between varying transportation needs? Was another question. Mary Kneebone echoes Melissa Johnson here by talking about transportation equity. That seems to be like the buzzword in the political soup that they swim around in. It's all about transportation equity or equity in transportation, whatever. So again, everybody kind of gives like the same basic answer. Like there's really nothing that makes anything stand out here. With the exception of, well, you hear, so Keith Kudrowski makes the point that, well, you know, we were kids, we used to bike everywhere and we were fine. You know, parents taught you to look both ways before crossing the street and things like that. And yes, I remember what it was like being a kid. We biked on busy streets all the time. And motorists, you know, they were always well aware of kids. You know, a lot of us just biked down the sidewalk, which never seemed to be an issue until recently. Apparently, they want kids biking on the road. So I don't know why, but it was never an issue. It was never an issue as a kid. Keith says this. I agree with that sentiment because, again, as a former kid myself, we had to, like, we knew the dangers of biking on the road and we had to be aware of them. So that was just something that you do. And so I don't understand this whole push for transportation equity. We need people who ride skateboards and kids who bike, and like we need them to share the same roads as fast moving vehicles. Like, I don't understand where that's coming from and why that's such an issue. But it's on this point alone that Sam Lang lets the mask drop a little bit, and you get a glimpse into somebody you somebody I'm not really stoked to be on city council. At least not to be replacing Polly Dalton, who I thought was a good council person. He lets the mask drop a little bit, and he says, he makes the first of all, he makes the point that we need to get our values and priorities in order, and realize that safety needs to be first and foremost. But that's not everybody's value and priority when it comes to Business 51. It's just not, and we should know this by now. We had a whole debate, and he along with so many others in this community who are failing to understand the arguments that other people are making. Again, this just goes to show that you can put aside everything that he's saying about listening and understanding other people that he disagrees with. He does not, obviously. You don't get to set my priorities, guy. You don't get to set my values. Okay. That's what these people don't understand. They think that this is safety is their number one concern. And that is the only concern with the Business 51. It's not. It's not the only concern here. It is, and like he even says, we get economic interests that try to muddy the waters on this. And I'm like, again, a failure to understand what the people who were opposed to this were trying to say about this. So, like I said, he lets the mask slip a little bit here, and you get a glimpse at somebody who really is no more interested in understanding another person's point of view than any of the people who voted against the referendum to begin with. So it's disappointing because up until this point, by the way, like, I thought Sam Lang did a pretty decent job. He was very straightforward with his answers. He's saying, yes, I do believe this. No, I don't believe that. Like, there wasn't a lot of waffling on anything. It was not a Melissa Johnson kind of forum for him. But man, he gets an F right here on this question. So the first thing he says is that this must be everybody's priority. I don't ride a skateboard. I don't even ride a bike. Like, I haven't ridden a bike probably. Well, that's not true. I've obviously ridden bikes as an adult, but that's not my main mode of transportation. Okay. I drive a car. So what are my priorities going to be when it comes to Business 51? Efficient traffic movement, right? As somebody who drives a car, that is my priority. You do not get to say my priority cannot be efficient traffic movement. All right. You do not get to tell the businesses that their priority cannot be uh, maintaining a good flow of traffic and making it easier for customers to come in and out of their business establishments. That is their priority, Sam. And you don't get to dictate that their priority can't be that. It has to be safety. And by the way, Business 51 is not unsafe. Could it be safer? You can make that argument. You can say that we want to do this to make Business 51 safer, but it's not unsafe. There are not piles of dead bodies on Business 51 of people riding their bikes or skateboarding or walking or whatever else. Okay. We don't have to bring snow plows through every day to clean all the dead bodies off the road because there's just so many of them there. Nobody, nobody is dying on Business 51, guys. So you can keep making this theoretical, hypothetical argument all day long, but the reality of the situation is that it is safe enough, apparently, that nobody's being killed on there. All right. So again, safety does not compute with me at all. That is not the reality of the situation. So, so we see that from Sam. Obviously, he's not as good a listener and understander of another person's point of view as he would like to think he is, just by the arguments that he's using for this. So, okay, and here's the other thing that I'm going to ding him for, because I absolutely hate when political candidates do this. I loathe when political candidates do this. And Sam did this here, unfortunately, which takes a lot of points away from him as far as I'm concerned. When you stand on the bodies of the dead to make a very innocuous political policy argument, or like an argument in favor of a particular political policy. He does that here. And I hate when people do this. So he's responding to Keith here, and he says, so Keith made the point that, oh, yeah, we rode bikes when we were kids. We all made it through, to adulthood. None of us got killed, blah, 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 blah. Sam says, yeah, we all did too when we were kids, and not all of us made it. Okay. He doesn't have all his friends coming into adulthood, apparently. And he follows this up immediately with saying, we didn't have bike lanes. Sam, none of us had bike lanes, dude. So basically what he's doing here, like, he's making it sound like he lost like 20 friends who got hit by cars on bikes because there were no bike lanes, he says. I absolutely hate when somebody tries to use their dead friends or relative to say, we need this policy. I just think it's really disingenuous. And he lost a lot of points with me for doing this because what are you really doing by it? It's an emotional appeal. For one thing, you are trying to get sympathy points from people. You are blaming their, and by the way, as a kid, I guarantee there was probably, like, assuming that he's even telling the truth about this, I'm assuming that whatever happened to his friends had to do with kids being dumb and doing dumb things and not respecting the fact that you could get very, very hurt by doing dumb things. Okay. I don't think they were just innocently riding around on their bikes and all of a sudden, bam, lights out forever. I'm guessing that's not what happened. Okay. I'm guessing it had a lot more to do with them not paying attention to something. And again, I have more than enough experience being a dumb kid and almost getting my own ass wiped out because I wasn't paying attention. Okay. So to turn around and say, well, this was because we didn't have bike lanes is so dumb in my mind. And what are you really saying? But, those people who are opposing us on this bike lane issue, what are they really doing? You know, like they obviously don't care about kids. They obviously don't care that people are going to die like my friends did. Like what a scummy way of trying to make an argument about something by telling somebody else that they're responsible in essence for the deaths of somebody you loved because they're not going along with your political policy. I just can't express enough how much I utterly hate when people do that, because that's not fair at all. So anyway, it's just, Sam, it's a really gross way of making your point. I'm sorry you couldn't do it in a more equitable fashion. Uh, yeah. And so then he goes on to say, "And this is why I will never forget this. And I will do what I can to make our cities safer, blah, 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 blah." Okay. I don't care what he has to say after that. Doesn't matter to me. Uh, so right up until the very last question, I thought, all right, this guy's all right. He seems okay. Like I had minor quibbles with him, but nothing that big. But like I said, the mask really dropped on that question, and you got to see something of him th- that I personally don't find very appealing at all. So, I'm sure he's a good enough guy. I'm not seeing alder material here. So, whatever. Anyway, that's it. That's mayor, that's city council, alders, League of Women Voters thing. Yeah. All right. Take this information and do with it what you want. I don't care. I'm just doing this for you, doing this for the good people at Stevens Point. All right. I'm ending this. I will do this again next Saturday, 10 o'clock sharp. Later.